Welcome to Equity Chat 2.0. My name is Keith Curry, one of the Equity Avengers. Today we have Dr. Darla Cooper, who's here from the RP group. And I'm gonna do a formal introductions, but we're really excited to have Dr. Cooper. So let me tell you more about Dr. Cooper. Dr. Darla Cooper is an educational leader and expert in research and evaluation, dedicated to using inquiry, data, and evidence to improve the lives of all community college students. She currently serves as executive director for the Research and Planning Group for the California Community Colleges, the RP Group. Dr. Cooper has worked in California Community College system for over 20 years, having previously held institutional research director positions at Santa Barbara City College, Oxnard College, and Ohlone College. She led student support Redefine, a landmark research project that examined what supports student success, and co-led Through the Gate, a research study that examined what happens with students who appear ready to transfer but do not. Darla Cooper has extensive experience serving as an external evaluator for several federal and private foundation grants and has worked on various other projects designed to promote student success, including the Aspen Prize for Community Colleges Excellence, the RP Group Bridging Research Information and Culture BRIC Initiative, and the American Association of Community Colleges AACC Pathways Project. Welcome, Dr. Cooper.
Well, thank you, Dr. Curry. It's my pleasure.
It was my first time ever reading your whole bio. I'm like, wow, you have done a lot.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about how long it took me to do all that.
Success takes time, right?
It does.
So as you engage in this equity work, and you've been doing it for over 20 years, what is your walk-up song? What gets you ready for this work?
Well, it's funny you ask this question because occasionally, I do a lot of presentations and occasionally someone will ask me, do you have walk-up song, that kind of song. And I often say no, because I can't decide, and I think about a song and then I listen to the lyrics and I'm like, oh, wait, I don't know if that's the message. Like it'll have one line in the lyrics and I'm like, oh, I'm not sure that's the message I want to send. And then I'm not sure, should I make the music about me, like personally? Should I make it about the work? Like, what do I do? And so I go from I'm every woman, which would be me, to Run the World, Girls, about me, but also What's Going On? Marvin Gaye, classic. I
It's
mean,
about
and
us.
then, yeah, about us and this work and Say It Loud. I'm Black and I'm Proud, which is about me and us. So I think I still need to decide.
So
And
you
maybe,
have a playlist.
yeah, there you go. Have a playlist instead of a song. I want everything. I want all of it. And so sometimes I don't react well when people say, pick one. I'm a horrible survey taker. Isn't that horrible to say as a researcher? I'm like, you don't even want to know how I judge other people's surveys. When they send them to me, I'm like, this is not the right way to ask this question. I would know how to do this better.
That's funny. I never thought about that, like as a researcher and like from your lens, right? And the way you look at things. So when you get a survey, you're probably looking at not the survey questions, you're looking at how they like that, where they put a certain question. So you're thinking about the whole design
Hmm.
of the study when it comes to you.
Oh, yes, I'm judging your survey, basically. Any
That's
survey I get,
wrong.
I'm judging the survey. I can't help it.
That's because you've been doing this work for so long.
I can't not see what I see.
But doesn't that help you as a leader though, as you do this work, to have that type of inquiry and looking at things from a different lens? That helps you when you design the next survey, right?
Exactly. And I talk to students and employees, at the colleges, always trying to gather information to make things better. Because if we don't ask the questions in a way that people understand, then we don't get the answers that we need. It's as
So,
simple as that.
so I'm gonna pivot a little bit. I have some other questions, but I want to stick on something right now as a follow up to this question. So as a leader, for me, is I'm surveyed out. I get so many different surveys, right? And now I'm trying to understand how you map out the surveys that you do to students, employees, and really organize yourself around the work and do it better. What advice would you give to leaders as it relates to survey development, and when to utilize surveys? Because I think we get in from my perspective, we might try to overdo it instead of having a strategy around getting input in surveys. What's your thoughts on that? I'm just
Well,
curious.
well, I think you just hit the nail on the head with the word strategy. What is your strategy? Why are you survey? What is this survey for? And I often will take people to the end, like so design things with the end in mind, right? So you do this survey and you get these results, and then what? And if you don't have a plan for what you're going to do with that, then you need to go back to the drawing board and ask the basic question of, do we need to be doing this survey? The other piece is really understanding what questions are you trying to answer, and is a survey the best way to answer them? Because sometimes it's not. There's certain nuances in a question that you may have. Survey's not going to get you. Surveys are for big, broad groups, and you're just kind of trying to go usually very, very shallow, right? It's not deep, it's shallow, but it's broad. So you're hearing, at a not as deep level from a lot of people versus something like focus groups or interviews where you're going to have a lot fewer people. So it's not as broad, but you can go much deeper. And you can also, that's the thing that I always say to people, remember when you're designing this survey, there's no opportunity for conversation. So you only get one chance to ask that question. There's no like, okay, they answer the question and then you can say, oh, well, based on that, I want to know that there's no chance to operate. And you can try to think it through and try to have branching and all of those things, but you've got to be able to ask that question because you get one shot at that question. So again, it's really going back to designing with the end in mind, having that strategy, figuring out why are we doing this survey? Is the survey the best way to gather this information? Are we even surveying the right people? So it's unfortunately the answer to your question is more questions.
No, no, but I don't. I do. I know it's more questions, but you're a researcher, so I figure that's how it works. But I think it's I think it's good to have the conversation, especially for listeners who are struggling with like how to gather input from just various stakeholders and how do you strategize around that. Because what I see a lot in my own personal job, right? Not a personal job, but in my job, is that a lot of people like, oh, we gotta do a survey, we gotta do a survey. It's like we got to do it for tomorrow, right? And that's not a strategy. You have to have a strategy of what surveys you want to do the entire year and mapping that out so you're not having so much survey work being done where
Yeah.
it's not going to be useful. But then also, I think you have to have prizes for students and people to participate, right? You have to drum up support. And so being very strategic about that is important to me now. But it took me some time to learn it too, right? To really understand the strategy part of it.
Well, the other piece, I mean, and this depends on your audiences, and we don't do a good job of circling back. So we do these surveys, we get results, and we often make changes based on those results. But we never communicate back to the people who took the survey, or at least the audience that was being asked to take the survey to say, hey, we did this survey. Here's what you all said, and here's what we're going to do about it. I think we just kind of skip that part. We get the results and we make changes based on the results. And then we just expect the people to put the two together, right? But remember, everyone just took the survey. And so they only know what their responses were. They don't know what everyone said. So you've got to do a better job of communicating. First of all, here are the results. Here's what the group said. And then here's what we're going to do about it. This is our response to it. Because students have asked me this all the time. Why should we take these surveys? You guys never do anything with them. And I'm like, well, sometimes that probably is true. But a lot of times it's not true. It's just that we haven't communicated to the students that we did do something. And so I think across higher education and probably even beyond that, could do a better job of telling people, thank you for doing the survey. And I agree with your incentives. That's in the moment to get them to do that. But even what would be even more incentive is that people start to see that you take it seriously, that you're listening, right? And that you're using the information from these surveys to make things better for them. And I would be more inclined to answer a survey if I thought it was going to have a result, if I thought it was going to lead to something that even if it didn't help me personally, it helped the group, being surveyed. But we do not do a good job of circling back to whether it's students, employees, whomever, of just telling them An additional thank you for taking this survey is to show we listened, we heard you. We're going to make changes. Here's the changes that we're making. Thank you for telling us. Thank you for taking the time to tell us.
No, I totally agree with you on what you said, and I think that's one of the things that I don't think I do a good enough job on is, and I do think we communicate well, but we don't communicate based off of the survey results. Like this is what's being implemented, right? Because I think people need to see that, and you need to show that documentation. Because we just did a survey for professional development, and we're restructuring some things, but we're not tying it back to the survey as much as we should be of what the people are asking for.
Yeah. I mean, I said I run a very small organization, but we do surveys. And but we also have this whole process of sharing the results. And when we share the results, we share actions, at least planned actions, at least that. Even if you can't share, it takes time sometimes to actually implement action. But even if you just tell people, and we're, based on these results, we're going to do A, B, C, and D. That's something just to let people know that you've been thoughtful about it. The other piece, since you got me started on this, so we don't close that loop. We also, I feel, we have so much information, so much data in higher ed, and we don't share it with students. We don't. We don't share it with the students in ways that they can use, right? We don't kind of go back to them and say, we looked at the data and it says students who do X are more likely to be successful, and put a number on that, 20% more likely, 100% more likely, whatever it is. And it doesn't mean that every student who hears that information is going to go right to it and they're going to do exactly, what you suggested, and that's that. But some might. I feel like we need to help students make more informed decisions. And I
So how do
just,
you So how
yeah.
do we do that though, right? And I know there's different research studies you can talk about that regards to this question, but how do we help students make better informed decisions and not just think about it from a student services perspective, right? How as an institution can we help students make better informed decisions? Because a lot of times people say, "Oh, that's a student services function," but how do you do that as an institution? Does that make sense?
Somewhat. I mean, I think it's the answer where I was going, at least one answer. I don't think there's one answer, by
Yeah.
the way. But one thing is to give them the information, help them process it. You can't just give it to them and walk away, but help them figure like, well, how does this apply to me? Right. So if we have our study says that, Black students who finish transfer level English and math in the first year are much more likely to go ahead and transfer later. Well, then we should have a conversation about that. Maybe you're having that conversation with your counselor, with your advisor, and figuring out, okay, how do I take that information and apply it to me and my circumstance? And so it's the information and, someone that can help them translate that information into action. That is appropriate for them because it's not going to be, it's not a one size fits all kind of situation. But I think that's at least a start so that, people have information and you're helping to equip them on what to do with that information and how to apply it to their lives and their success.
Let me ask you a question. Was there a defining moment or experience that catalyzed your journey to engage in this type of work, using research methods to reveal inequities in our system?
So I'm not sure this is the defining moment, but there is a moment that I occasionally share in my presentations. Um, of a time when I didn't move and that and through hindsight I try to do better going forward. It's something that I'm embarrassed about at this time, even though I give myself grace based on where I was because this was many years ago and where I was positioned at the time. But I do think about what I could have done differently based on what I know now. So many years ago, when I worked at one of the colleges, won't say which one, before equity was really a common term, right? I mean, it's not that obviously it's been a word for a long time, but it wasn't used as much as it has been over, I'd say, the last 10 years or so. And it wasn't a movement that I would say it has become. So I did an analysis of graduation rates, And I found that Black students were graduating at a much lower rate than everybody else. And so I took those findings to my, vice president, and with great level of concern and saying, well, we got to, we got to do something about this. What are we going to do? The Black students are like, we got to help them. And I was told that there were not enough Black students at that college for us to be worried about these data. And I just was kind of like, uh, okay. Um, and so I'm embarrassed about it, and now, because I didn't know what to do at the time. This is a vice president. I'm a director of research. I have no clout, right? No one reports to me. Like I didn't know what to do. I was shocked. I was dumbfounded, by that. And I just figured that I wasn't in a position to make anything happen. Um, I don't have the vice president's support. So what am I going to do? Doesn't even seem to be interested, right? So I moved on. I was disappointed, and I never looked at that person the same way again, but I didn't know what to do. So in hindsight, I realized, that what I could have done was to try to build a coalition, right? I should mention here that at this particular college, there weren't very many Black employees, period, faculty, staff, otherwise. So there wasn't like a group of people that I could just kind of take it to them and then we could get together and do that. They just weren't there. But there were people who weren't Black who would have been allies, what we call allies now, again, a term we weren't using at that time. But I knew, there were people who would have cared about this and who would have been, like, yeah, we got to do something. And so, I hope that other people, who are probably in similar positions where you don't feel like you don't have the positionality, you don't have the authority, and you may have even gone to someone in a position of authority who's said they're not interested and they're not going to support, that effort. Maybe that's at least one way to go about it, and one way I wish I had done it. Um, and so carry that with me and realizing that I don't have to do all this by myself and that it really is about partners. I prefer co-conspirators to allies, um, and building those coalitions to try to do this work together. So anyway, I share this story, different presentations just to kind of illustrate that yes, positionality matters. I'm not trying to say, well, just, forget about it, but look for other ways to garner support and raise awareness when you see these kind of inequities. So,
If you could achieve one breakthrough in racial equity that would have that would have the most significant impact on student success, what would it be?
well, this one's a long one because like you already saw with the first answer, it's very hard to get me to pick one thing.
For sure.
And so I
It's a
choose.
playlist.
Exactly. So, starting with like our recent study, our African American transfer tipping point study, I was actually hoping that I was going to discover like the one thing that would be that tipping point for Black students' chances of transferring. Because I knew from our previous study that if Black students reach a certain point, I didn't know what the point was, but I knew based on some other data, if there must be some kind of tipping point where they go from being one of the least likely to transfer to the most likely to transfer. And I really wanted to discover what was that thing. What I learned is that it's not just one thing, and that it's a combination of factors and the way those factors combine in different ways for different students. And so it is what we mentioned earlier. It's about completing math and English in the first year. It's about, having a connection, seeing, an academic counselor. It's about participating in different success programs like Emoja or EOPS. It's avoiding academic probation. But it's this combination of factors that really lead to what a student's chances are in terms of being successful. Going back to that original study, Through the Gate, we found four factors that, really rose to the top in terms of students' transfer success. University affordability. Do they even think they can afford the university? A lot of students don't know where to go to find the answer to that question. They don't know if they can afford to go to the university. So they go all that way and then they just stop. Pathway navigation, students taking courses they don't need, right? Students, all the excess units, excess time. Students, you know, transfer is not just about the courses. You obviously you have to take the right courses, but students need to know what are the other steps that you have to take, right? School life balance is huge. Our students are complex people with complex lives. They have school along with work and family responsibilities. And I don't know if colleges are really treating them like the whole people that they are and acknowledging that they need to find more ways to accommodate the complexity of students' life through structures and scheduling, policies, practices, et cetera. And then finally, the support network. We found that students who have like a strong support network are much more likely to be successful than those who don't. I mean, some of this stuff is not rocket science, right? It's pretty obvious. Going all the way back to our kind of landmark study, Student Support Redefined, and the six success factors. What we found for Black students was that feeling nurtured, or being nurtured and feeling valued were more important to them than they were to other students. So after all these studies, I'm kind of like, there's a through line here, especially for Black students, which is they want relationships, not transactions. They want transformational relationships, those things that that can affect their success versus the transactions. And when I talk to students, about their success, they often talk about the people who help them be successful, the people at the college, right? Whether that's a counselor, professors, student service professionals, and other students. So I guess, that's a lot of long answer, but if I had to kind of boil it down, it's really about how can we build our systems, our processes, our policies around what we know helps Black students? Because when Black students succeed, all students succeed.
So why do you make that statement? I hear that a lot. If Black students succeed, all students succeed. Why'd you make that statement?
Because I have a quote that I share in one of my presentations from a Black woman student, and she talked about how she had taken English 3 times, and finally on the third try, she got lucky and got it and had this teacher who really cared. And she says he happened to be Black. So she's even acknowledging that it wasn't him being Black that is what helped her succeed. He just happened to be Black. But then she goes through and lists all the things that he did do that helped her succeed. And they're all different ways of caring and spending more time and being focused on whether students are actually learning, giving them feedback, taking time to get to know their name. I mean, it was just very simple things. And a lot of times, you know, we're thinking that it's this special thing that, no, it's a lot of it is just it's very simple things that teachers, can do. Looking at their practice, looking at their syllabus, looking at their assessment, all of these things.
So the next question I have for you, to do this work, we must continue learning and partnering with others. How do you educate yourself and who is informing your practice?
So first of all, I would say I do this by recognizing what I don't know and then seeking out others' experience and expertise I specifically seek to learn more about the groups that I don't belong to. And therefore, I may not be, as familiar with their history, their experiences, their contributions. I try to engage in conversation with colleagues that are in all different kind of positions within higher ed and beyond to understand, their perspectives, their experiences again, whether that's instructors, counselors, other researchers, presidents, vice presidents, deans, classified professionals, all across the institutions. I really do try to listen to understand, and I'm willing to risk revealing my ignorance by owning it and asking questions and kind of showing people that I genuinely want to learn, I genuinely want to know. Um, As far as like partnering, my approach has always been to partner instead of compete. And looking for ways to work with other organizations or other researchers because we can do so much more when we work together versus when we compete against each other. And then finally, I would say I learned the most from students. Even though it's not technically in my job description anymore, to do research, I try to stay involved and continuously inform my practice. My uh, absolute favorite thing to do is to talk to students, and I make time to do student focus groups still. I just did some back in April. Every chance that I get, hopefully I can do some at least once a year. But listening to them, it helps ground me, it helps ground my work and the work of the RP group. And it just constantly reminds me of why I'm here, why I chose this path for my career, for my life. It helps keep me going. And I really do take the responsibility seriously of when these students give me this information, when they share their stories with me, it is my responsibility to carry their voices forward and to especially to take their voices into spaces where students often are not invited and they're not included. And really try to inform, again, not just my work, but other people's work by through that student voice. And that's actually even one of our goals in our new strategic plan for the RP group. That's actually goal number one, which is about the inclusion of students and student voice in our work. So we put it out front.
So can you tell a little bit about your strategic plan, just regards to RP group? And this is the first time I, ever ask about your strategic plan. And so
It's
I'm curious to
okay.
know, what's your strategic plan?
So it all kind of, started, we had already had equity as a goal, or not a goal, sorry, a value. Equity was a value for many years for the RP group. But we got to a point where we said, well, what does that mean? What does that look like? How do you operationalize equity? It's one thing to just say, yes, equity is a value, but where does it show up? And we started kind of down that road and said, we got to do better here. We got to, define it. And then George Floyd was murdered, and that just accelerated and elevated everything. And so we were like, okay, we absolutely have to do better, and we have to do better right now. And so that's been, a process since then of us, operationalizing, um, articulating, committing to what does being equity minded look like in our organization. And we got to a point where our current strategic plan was, terming out. And of course, so you got to gear up to do the new one. And we said, I don't want to have a separate equity plan. We, Equity needs to be embedded in our new strategic plan, even though we had no idea what that would look like. But we committed to doing that, and we spent over a year working together, the board, the staff. We had meetings with our researchers across the system to get feedback. We reached out to different partner organizations, all different kind of things to get that information. And you know, we feel pretty good about it. And you can hopefully, if you take a look at it, you can see where how the equity is woven throughout and why we really felt that we don't need a separate plan. It's throughout the plan. We don't have a separate goal. We don't have an equity goal in the plan. Each goal, we have four goals, and each one hopefully you can see our commitment to equity and then how we've operationalized it specifically. So we're proud of it. I'm probably a little biased.
Well, I think I don't know. I think having strategic plans and having something that you can be proud of is important. And I think it's something that I don't know. I think we don't do enough talking about our planning processes, right? And having conversations about our planning and trying to link our planning to budget and all, things that people say are strong is things that you're supposed to do for strong organizations. Being able to talk about those things as you're doing it, I think is important for people to learn from that.
We're
I truly,
trying this. We're just finishing it. The plan took place last July, so we're coming up on the end of our first year. So we're in the process now of holding ourselves accountable. So it's like, okay, we have this new plan. We made all these commitments, got these goals and objectives and strategies and actions and activities and all of that stuff. So how do we do in our first year? So ask me in a few months. We should have some kind of report that says this is what we did and this is what we still have to do.
So my last question, what gives you hope for the future? What gives you hope?
Well, speaking of which, as part of our strategic plan, we obviously we redid our mission, we redid our vision, we redid our values, and included in our vision my hope is the dream, and it says that our vision is to help address long-standing injustices to ensure that students' demographics do not predict their post-secondary success. Right now, that's not the case. You can look at a student's demographics and predict their success because of systemic racism and all other, kinds of issues, other kinds of discriminations, the issue of poverty. All of those things predict whether a student's likelihood of being successful. We'd love to get to a place where that's not the case, and that other things, hopefully students' effort and things like that, will predict their success. Um, what gives me hope is that in spite of the current climate and the actions being taken, people are holding on, people are digging in, they're fighting back to preserve and continue and accelerate equity. And I know it's super cliche, but I think things are cliche for a reason. But, I have to believe that Martin Luther King is right and that the arc of the moral universe is long and it will bend towards justice. And in spite of everything that has been happening, is happening, we have to continue to fight together, and not lay down, not be silent. Um, that's what gives me hope because I see people doing that. I mean, this past weekend was one sign of that, but that's what gives me hope.
And on that comment, thank you, Dr. Darla Cooper, for spending time with me on Equity Chat 2.0. We'll be out soon.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you, Dr. Perry.